Well, Pakistan's Prime Minister remains in his post after surviving a legal attempt to push him out. The Supreme Court ruled that there was insufficient evidence of corruption to remove him. Now, the case was brought after the Panama Papers revealed details of his family's vast wealth. Now, this drama is not over yet, though. The court has ordered a new inquiry, as Mobin Nasir reports.
Both pro- and anti-government demonstrators are claiming victory in Pakistan. They're reacting to the country's top court's ruling on corruption allegations against Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his family. The government's claiming victory because the Prime Minister has not been removed from office.
Of the opposition was to get the Prime Minister disqualified, which the court has rejected. They have formed an investigation team, which was the proposal of the government and the Prime Minister.
But the controversy, which began with the Panama Papers leak, refuses to go away. Documents leaked from the offshore accountancy firm Mossack Fonseca allege Prime Minister Sharif's family used a network of shell companies to buy apartments in London and set up factories in the Middle East. Opposition parties approached the country's highest court saying that the Prime Minister lied under oath and concealed his assets. On Thursday, the court ordered further investigations to find out where the first family made its fortunes and whether they have evaded taxes in Pakistan. The verdict, which took 57 days to prepare, begins with a damning quote from Mario Puzo's godfather: "Behind every great fortune, there is a crime." And the opposition wants the Prime Minister to step down so a free and fair inquiry can be carried out.
How can Nawaz Sharif remain in office? What moral stand does he have now that there will be a criminal investigation against him?
Despite the relief expressed by the government, it still has to launch an investigation against itself. And with problems like persistent power shortage in the country, it can barely afford to be embroiled in controversy. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
And Mobin joins me in the studio now. Mobin, I don't understand. How does Nawaz Sharif convince the court that all this wealth was actually legal and accounted for?
Well, Matthew, on the contrary, he's done anything but that. In fact, the judgment you saw in the report, the quote from the godfather, the judgment actually goes on to call this a crime properly executed, hence no paper trail, and hence the order for a further inquiry.
Okay, so why is it at this point then they didn't oust him from office based on the evidence that they had if they're willing to make those sort of comments?
So let's go back to the judgment. 5 judges, 2 of them entered dissenting notes, both saying that the Prime Minister is not fit to remain in office now, but the majority said there wasn't enough evidence provided. Keep in mind here that this case was brought by the opposition parties, not by the institutions whose job it is to investigate such issues. And those institutions like the Federal Investigation Agency have been termed inept. The court says in one of the lines that they did not bother to challenge previous court decisions that did not consider all the evidence that they had provided. So
now, in this new inquiry, are you telling me the same state institutions are going to be, in charge of that inquiry?
Precisely.
And then how can you expect another outcome?
Well, perhaps you don't, and maybe that is the reason for celebration. Keep in mind, there have been judicial commissions formed earlier, many times in the past. None of those have really ever come out with any convictions. So if this one goes down the same road, you can expect a similar
And that's
fate.
why Nawaz Sharif's supporters are celebrating, because they think, well, if it's just a rerun, nothing will happen to him. Okay, what sort of level of wealth are we talking about here? You mentioned flats in London.
Well, that depends on who you ask, really. If you ask the opposition, the number is as high as tens of billions of dollars. If you go by the Prime Minister's speech that he gave on television, it's nothing except what he inherited from his family, from his parents. And if you go by what his lawyers admitted to in court, there are at least 5 apartments in posh areas of London, like Mayfair or Park Lane. There's some steel mills, other factories around the world, and a number of companies.
Many of Qatar as well?
Yes. In fact, one of the pieces of evidence that was brought to court and subsequently thrown out was a letter provided by one of the royals from there, which said that some of this money was in fact given by him as a present.
It's very hard, isn't it? Particularly in Pakistan, where maybe the records are a little bit, let's say, not well kept or whatever. And if you go back generations and say, well, this wealth was accumulated over generations, it's a little hard to disprove it, isn't it?
Precisely. And if you look at it, the Prime Minister is just the tip of the iceberg here. There are 220 people whose names were listed, Pakistanis whose names were listed in the Panama Papers. Of course, not all of that has to be illegitimate per se, but it does beg the question, especially in a country where you have a tax to GDP ratio of about 12%, so barely anyone's paying anything.
Let me ask you, not about specifically this case, but about Pakistanis' attitude towards the elite in general. Are they, I mean, you're from the country and you know many people there, and you've been there for many years. Tell me, are people really fed up with the elite taking the money, stashing it overseas and living the life of Raleigh off the backs of the ordinary people?
I'd say it's a little more nuanced than that because, yes, there is corruption, but then how do you define people not paying their taxes? Is that also not a sign of people not buying into the social contract, not trusting the government enough to pay up and expect benefits that they would get for the money that they would pay up to the government?
Fair enough. OK, Mobin Nasir, thank you so much.